All right, we are going to get started here. My name is Marty Atkinson. I'm the Adult Programming Coordinator for Peter White Public Library. And before I say anything else, I have a few groups and organizations that I have to thank for making tonight possible. If you are watching on YouTube right now, you have the Friends of Peter White Public Library to thank for that. They pay for all of our streaming equipment here and allow us to bring this to a much wider audience. So I'm always grateful to the Friends for what they do for us. I also have to thank the Library of Michigan, the Library of Michigan Foundation, and also I have to thank Michigan Humanities, who get much of their funds from the National Endowment for the Humanities as well. Those are the groups that really do bring us the Michigan notable authors here to Peter White Public Library and other libraries around the state. And I also have to thank Snowbound Books. Dana, my girl back there, she never lets me down. So please support your local bookstore and stop by afterwards and check out Tim's books back there. He does have a Castaway in Montana, and he's got his first book back there as well for sale. So I'm just going to ask you also at the end of tonight if you could take just a minute. I have some surveys back here that the Library of Michigan asks us to have you fill out. If you can take just a minute to do that, that would be great. If you don't have time tonight to do this, there is a QR code back there. You can take a picture of that and then just use your phone to fill out the survey after the fact. All right. So a couple things coming up since you're all here for books. I'm assuming that you're all readers. So I'm going to just highlight a couple of the authors and programs that are coming up when it comes to author to books. So at the end of this month, on Thursday, January, oh please, I'm not ready for that yet, June 26th, from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. upstairs in the Shiras room. We have a really wonderful event. Ann Berman is going to be here to talk about her book, Louis Graverett Kaufman. This is the longest title in the world, so please, I got to take a deep breath. Louis Graverett Kaufman, the fabulous Michigan Gatsby who conquered Wall Street, took over General Motors, and built the world's tallest building. That's the title. But it's going to be a really wonderful night because we are going to have Tyler Tischler, who is going to be sort of moderating that event, and then we also have Kaufman's, I think it's his grandson or great-grandson, who's going to be there as well to talk about his family. So that's at the end of the month, Thursday, June 26th. And of course, we have the adult reading program going on, as well as the teen reading program and youth reading program as well. And then a couple other things. At the end of July, we have a couple more authors coming in. One is named Karen Babe, I don't know if this is correct, Babine, B-A-B-I-N-E, who has a really wonderful memoir called The Allure of Elsewhere, a memoir about going solo. And it's about her trip to, I think it's Cape Cod with her two cats, who are not very happy about going to Cape Cod with her. So that is on Tuesday, July 29th in the Shiras room, and then on Thursday, July 31st, right here in the community room at 6:30 p.m., we are going to have Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, who will be joining us to read and talk about her book, The Purposeful Warrior Reading, The Purposeful Warrior. And we also have Elizabeth Peterson, who was formerly of TV6. I'm pretty sure most of you know who she is. Will be moderating that discussion with Secretary Benson as well. So lots of great things coming up. And also don't forget that the Concert on the Step series kicks off this week. I have checked and been checking the weather. And as far as I can tell, it's going to be dry on Wednesday with a high of like 65, so that's not bad. So please show up for our kickoff to our Concert on the Step series, and that's going to be Troy Graham this Wednesday. Next Wednesday, we have the Make Believe Spurs, and then on the 25th, we have Cloverland. That's a really great lineup of bands for that first month. So anyway, and this is all available, June, July flyers out there. The questionnaires are back there, and if you don't fill it out, I'm probably going to tap you out the door and hand you one and say, please fill this out. But my job now is to get Tim up here on the stage to start talking. I met Tim last week. Wednesday on Upper Michigan Today, and we talked a little bit. I'm an Ishpeming boy, so I have many stories about John Volker and his love of fly fishing and everything like that. I never met the man. The one time, my father was a plumber, and the one time that I thought I was going to meet him, we were going out to his house to fix a leaky shower or something like that, and I was so excited. I actually volunteered to go on this job. And we got out to the house, and unfortunately, John had already left to go fishing when I got there, which probably is pretty apropos for tonight, because we have Tim here, who is an avid fly fisherman, and I know that he's a huge fan of John Volker as well. So please welcome to the Peter White Public Library stage, Mr. Tim Schulz.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. I suppose since you're recording this, I should stay here and not move around. Don't move. Okay. Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. And if I can give you a little insight into how excited I am, let me tell you what I posted on social media about this event, about all these events. The Castaway in Montana tour is rolling through the UP like a 57 Jeep Willis wagon on a 2-track dirt road. We have a van, a driver, roadies, merch, duct tape, Red Bull, M&Ms with the brown ones removed, a dog-eared copy of Trout Madness, 2 green Sharpies, 1 Bluetooth speaker, and a Library Talks or my Coachella t-shirt. All that is missing is you, and you're all here now. You can't imagine, maybe you can, how incredible this is to me. And I'll try to give you enough background that you'll see how it would be. To be speaking about a fishing book in the Peter White Library and having Snowbound Books selling my books, it's incredible. I wouldn't call it a dream come true because I never dreamed of anything like this happening. And I'm going to try to give you some insight into what I mean by that. Last week, though, I have to address a couple of things. Anybody, of course, we know one of the great UP residents, Tom Izzo. Tom Izzo has a way with words, and when he needs to talk about something that needs to be talked about, he likes to say we have to address the white elephant in the room, which doesn't really work, but it seems to work for him. And in the Mining Journal, the press release for this event said, fishing expert to give address. And the next line said, Peter White Public Library, in collaboration with the Library of Michigan, will welcome Upper Peninsula native and passionate angler Tim Schulz for a special presentation of his Michigan notable book. We have to address 2 things. One is this concept of being an expert, which I still have not met a fly fishing expert. I'll give you a little insight. I just visited a friend who's in the hospital here, and he immigrated from Poland. I'll get a little emotional maybe. Immigrated from Poland many years ago, didn't know anything about trout fishing, became one of the deadliest trout anglers in the western end of the Upper Peninsula, certainly in the Copper Country, with a spinning rod and reel. He decided he wanted to learn to fly fish. Started asking me for advice. He asked me if I would tell him a place to go, and I said, sure, because I'm an expert. I said, but I'm going to give you one of my secret spots. You cannot tell anyone. He said, of course, Tim, never. So I didn't see him for a long time, kind of stayed away from me. When we finally saw each other, I said, how's it going, Yarek? Is everything okay? And he said, Tim, you give me a spot that is so secret, not even fish know about it. That'll give you some insight into my expertise. The issue of being a a native. I guess, maybe. I don't know where that came from. I've tried to figure out why the University of Michigan, or the Michigan Library, why they listed me as a native. I looked back to see if I made a mistake and called myself a native, and I didn't. So I'm not sure where it came from. But my career is in academics, and many times in academics we give things called honorary degrees. I'll take it. They can call me a native if they want to, but a key part of my story will make it very clear I'm not a native of the UP. Another thing, how many people fish that are here today? Have fly fish, right? Okay, so fly fishing, if I could give you a little insight into it, fly fishing is all about dealing with trouble and putting positive spins on things that don't deserve positive spins. I use a quote, it's in the Habits of Trout, and I used it the other day on an interview from Jimmy Buffett in an old album of Jimmy Buffett's. He, introducing a song on a live album, he said, "Tragedies very soon become comedies, and they better become comedies real quick, or else you're in a lot of trouble." And I got to tell you a story I just thought of today. Back in my days, 1974 to 79, in tennis, Jimmy Connors and Vitas Gerulaitis. Jimmy Connors beat Vitas Gerulaitis 16 straight matches. And in 1980, they were playing a match, and finally Vitas Gerulaitis beat him. When he went to the podium to talk about it, they asked how it felt, and he said, "Let that be a lesson to all of you. Nobody beats Vitas Gerulaitis 17 times in a row." He had to have been a fly angler to have that kind of attitude. So let's see. I came to the UP in 1992. I've been here over half my life. But I did not come here to be a writer. I did not come here to be a fly angler. I hoped to be a fly angler, but I didn't know if that would ever happen. I came here to be a professor of electrical engineering at Michigan Tech. And that's been my job until January when I retired. So now I have a different job, and I hope it's writing a lot more stories, a lot more books. When I came here, I started trying to learn about fishing in the UP. I'll tell a quick story of my wife. When we were living in Ann Arbor, I worked for a place called Environmental Research Institute of Michigan. I was looking for faculty positions. I saw an advertisement for Michigan Tech. I asked her, she grew up in Michigan, where it was. She showed me on a map. I saw rivers, I saw streams, I saw the greatest of all Great Lakes. I said, that sounds like a wonderful thing. I will apply, we'll see what happens. She said, "Are you crazy? There's no way we're moving to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, particularly up there." I said, "Why?" She said, "It's too cold and it snows and it's a horrible place to live." That was back in the day when people did not take pictures with their phones. They did not keep all of their photos on computers. They took them with Kodak cameras. They took them to drugstores or little shacks and got them developed, and they put them in books like normal people were supposed to do with pictures. She had a cousin, and they invited them over to dinner. The whole goal was they're going to tell us how terrible it was. They'd gone to Michigan Tech. They will tell us how terrible it is, and then I'll get over this. They came over with their photo albums, showed us all of the pictures, and said something I heard for the first time then, and I've heard an uncountable number of times since, dealing with people who went to Michigan Tech. They would move back in a minute if they could find a way to work and live there. And so we went for the interview, and we're here. Although I will tell you, the interview, we came the weekend after Winter Carnival, and our oldest son was about 6 months old. While I was interviewing, she was being shown around town. We had a rental car. She went to the rental car, had our son in one hand, and dropped the keys into a snowbank. Nobody, to this day, as far as we know, ever found those keys. So everyone was betting we wouldn't be here, but we were, and we are still. Fishing. I started trying to learn about trout fishing, and along the way, I started buying books. And I bought books. I brought one book with me, which I don't know how many people have read it. I recommend it highly. It's called What the River Knows, An Angler in Midstream by Wayne Fields. And it's written about fishing Cook's Run, which is a tributary to the Paint. Turns out Wayne Fields was a professor of literature at Washington University in St. Louis, and he would vacation in the Upper Peninsula. I had recently graduated from Washington University in St. Louis, so there was a strong connection there. But then I found these books, Trout Magic and Trout Madness, and I read them, and I learned that this guy lived right here in the UP and was writing about fishing in the UP. Of course, you know him, his name, John Volker. He wrote as Robert Traver. And I learned that he had a spectacular life. And part of the charm was that he had the opportunities to do anything, and he did many, many things. Of course, he wrote a best-selling book, which was turned into a movie, filmed in the UP, the Academy Award nominated. He was on Michigan's Supreme Court, and he walked away from it all. And when a photographer for Life magazine asked him how it is that someone with that kind of education, that kind of accomplishment, could do anything he wanted, could do it anywhere he wanted, how it is he wound up living in the UP and playing cribbage each day and fishing for trout, do you know what his answer was? Just lucky, I suppose. And I started feeling that way. But I wanted to feel more like he felt about trout. So I started digging around. To get quicker, get to the Castaway in Montana book, let's just go a little faster. And in 2011, my obsession was so severe, I came to the Northern Michigan University Library and started digging through the archives that have all of John Volker's journals. My goal was to try to pin his fishing adventures to stories in his books. And the third book I would add would be Anatomy of a Fisherman. And what I hoped I would do is go visit those places and take pictures of them, see what they look like. I love the photography by Robert Kelly that's in Anatomy of a Fisherman. And so I started doing that. And to keep interest, my own interest, this was a time blogs were a big thing. I started blogging, and I would put some of the photographs online. Then I started writing stories. I'd write little stories about the adventures. And before long, my interest went more to the stories. And I had several of these stories on this blog, and people were asking me, what are you going to do with those? What's the point about them? And I didn't know the answer. And when I thought about it, I thought that was the time you could start to self-publish. And when I thought of it as self-publish, you would literally publish something for yourself. You would be the one that would read it. And I thought, well, I'll do about a dozen of those. I'll give them to the kids when they get older and friends when they want to know, like, what's the story with this guy? What was he actually doing? Maybe they would read the stories and they would understand better. And so I got that all together, and I sent it to a friend of mine, the great author, a true treasure of Michigan, treasure of the whole country, Jerry Dennis. Jerry read it, and he said, this should get broader reach. He said, find a way to get this out in the bookstores and get it out to other folks. And that was The Habits of Trout. So I did it. I wrote that book with many stories. That's all about fishing here in the UP with a couple of personal anecdotes in it. And it did do well. It did well. I was invited to go down to Lovell's, Michigan, and speak at a Celebrate Michigan Rivers event because of that book. In the process, another writer that was invited in is named Bob DeMott. Bob was there. Got to know Bob, and over dinner and breakfast, he repeatedly told me that every year he goes to Montana to fish, and he invited me to come along. Didn't have to think about it too long, but it did take a while, and ultimately I decided that I'd go to Montana. No intent whatsoever to write a book about going to Montana. I'm not a fan of those kind of books that would say, hey, here's Montana, I'm going to go to the Missouri River, I'm going to go to the Madison River and tell you about it, those types of things. That wasn't on my agenda at all. But that is how A Castaway in Montana happened. And people have asked, when did I know, what inspired it? What I can tell you, I'll try to share a little bit of the story here today with a few readings and then get to some point where we can have some discussion. Maybe you can ask some questions. About 2/3 of the way into the trip, I was at the Sportsman's Motel. It's a small motel, maybe it's got a half dozen rooms, in Melrose, Montana, right near the Big Hole River. And I was in one of those rooms, and I pulled out a yellow legal pad, and I started writing down. I thought, well, it would be okay to find a couple stories, articles I might write. And as I started to write down titles, prospective titles and topics, I realized there was a thread. There was something that could connect all of this together into part memoir, part travel log, part independent fishing essays, and that's how the book came about. So, if you're going to go to Montana, you have to get there, and to get there, you have to leave your home. And what I want to read at the first reading from the book, I want to read from a chapter that's called Goodbye. And I will do my best to read this like a normal person ought to read. Goodbye. How lucky I am to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard. A. Milne, Winnie the Pooh. Ever since Bob planted the seeds for this trip last September, Roxanne has watered and weeded until roots have taken hold and sprouts have pushed through the soil. Now the crop is mature, the fruit is ripe, and it's time for me to go to Montana. I've packed the truck with all the pots, pans, blankets, pillows, and tackle I'll need to eat, sleep, and fish for the next 3 weeks. Enough stuff, really, to stay twice as long if I want. I plan to leave around 8 a.m., but it's close to noon, and I'm pacing the house like a child delaying bedtime, pretending I need to find one more thing for the trip. Roxanne knows I should have left hours ago. It doesn't take Nancy Drew's eye to decode my tactics, but she also knows why I haven't. My stalling routine this morning is as transparent as the clear Montana sky will be tonight. So when I take the leash from its hook, she smiles and says, "Just one more time." Saying nothing in return, I fasten the clasp to Sonny's collar, take him for our third and final morning walk. I hate to say goodbye. Whether to a person, an animal, a place, a thing, or simply an idea, I don't like to do it. I've been like this since I was a kid. Most notably, I dreaded how Sunday brought its abrupt farewell to the weekend. I never wanted to go to school the way kids with straight teeth and brand-name shoes did. I didn't like what it was, a place I had to sit still and pretend to listen, or what it wasn't, a place without cornfields, oak trees, and bluegill ponds. My issue with Sundays went further than that, though. On that day, while watching an episode of Bonanza, I first realized everyone and everything I knew would die. My mom, my dog Brandy, Uncle Floyd, Aunt Gladys, and yes, even me. I don't remember what it was about that show that did it. Maybe little Joe got bushwhacked in the desert. Perhaps Ben said something profound about life and death. I'm not even sure it had anything to do with the show. I only know I didn't want to watch Bonanza again after that night. One of the great things about putting your work out, it's a lonely job, and it gets out and gets some light on it. Sometimes you get wonderful notes. I got a wonderful note from a man in Texas, very involved in Trout Unlimited, big fan of fly fishing literature, told me how much he loved the book. So much so, he was going to send it to another friend of his, ask him to read it. And he did. And when that person read it, he sent me verbatim the response he got back. The book was terrific. It took me a while to get into it because I thought he was sort of a weenie to begin with. However, he won me over with his style and erudition. And at the end, I didn't want it to finish, which is my mark of a good book. Thank you so much for sending it to me. The weenie, huh? That's good. I liked it. But the other thing is this word, erudition. You know what that word means? Yeah. It means the quality of having or showing great knowledge or learning. If you want to hear some iron that's as thick as the sunscreen paste we anglers put on our noses, I had to look that word up. So to keep going on this topic, the dog, I'll give you just a little bit of a side story. So I'm here because this book was listed as one of Michigan's notable books for this year, written either by an author from Michigan or by anyone about Michigan. I was so surprised because the book has Montana in its title, that they would pick it. And I talked to one of the judges, and he was the strongest advocate for the book, he said. And he said that came up, that people would say it's about Montana. But he said, no, there's so many stories about Michigan and connections to Michigan. He made that case. But then he said, but above all, The dog. The story's about the dog. He loved the dog. So let me tell you a little more. The kids picked Sonny's name before seeing the dog, and their choice was perfect. From the first day in our home, he found immediate comfort in the glow of even the slightest patch of sunshine. As a small puppy, he circulated about the house like a hairy, high-energy sundial, mornings by the east-facing windows, evenings by the west-facing ones. With age, Sonny perfected the art of sunbathing, taught himself the difference between a sunbeam's leading and trailing edge. He used that knowledge to maximize his time under the beam and minimize the number of moves he'd need to make from window to window. What do dogs do on their day off? The comedian George Carlin once asked. Can't lie around. That's their day job. Well, I mean none of this to portray Sonny as a lazy dog. The puppy crazies, those moments in life when something deep inside compels us to run like hell in circles for the sole purpose of running like hell in circles, they were encoded permanently into his DNA. Mine too, I suppose. When he was happy, which was any time he didn't hear the frightening sound of thunder or anger in a human voice, his tail would wag every inch of his muscular body. He had no limit to how many times he could chase a stick into Lake Superior's frigid water. But time is a relentless bandit. It's gotten its hands on both of our strong boxes. We've slowed, neither of us can deny that. The gray hairs on our faces signal sprains, strains, and worn-down joints that'll never have that new car feel again. When either of us gets that urge, though, we still drop just about anything we're doing to take 20 or 30 laps around a coffee table. Or at least we give it one heck of a try. Now, with over 14 years in the mirror, it's hard not to notice how every day behind is one less in front. Sonny's arthritic hips don't navigate the stairs and trails with the linebacker's power and gymnast grace they once did. His old ears don't respond to commands and calls, not even in the selective way they used to, partly because he's lost most of his hearing, and partly, as Jimmy Buffett once put it, because he don't care what most people say. Several tumors, mostly those benign fatty ones that plague so many dogs, have misshaped his body. But the cancer tumor on his back is more massive than his heart. And that, being the heart of a Labrador Retriever, is enormous. Still, we walk the trail we've walked together countless times. He stops to smell every daisy and black-eyed Susan his failing eyes see. I've never needed to tell Sonny to stop and smell the roses, or another dog's poop for that matter. He marks his favorite oaks and maples to warn the other dogs, especially the younger ones, that they are still guests in his woods. A gray squirrel crosses the trail before us, but Sonny doesn't chase. Instead, he cocks his head to the side, just the way he does when someone says please, and he thinks they've said cheese. Then after a few seconds, he gives the squirrel a deep in my younger days bark and limps his way on with our walk. The trails here have names from the Lord of the Rings. Troll, ring, ant, gnome, elf, and hobbit. Maybe, just maybe, I hope, if we walk the elf loop one more time, Sonny could be immortal. I looked online, and I think it was the Classic Angler Forum. You sometimes find reviews of your book, and I like this one. My first thoughts on having started this book were, oh no, another cathartic fishing diary. I can't take it. Well, not really. Schulz's writing style flows. Each chapter moves clearly and with purpose. Is there a touch of personal catharsis included? Sure, but it doesn't take away from the fishing journey. The fishing journey. So we got to talk about the fishing. So I did leave home. I did drive all the way to Montana, and I did fish. Let me tell you a little bit about one of those trips. When I first arrived, I was jumping around like crazy. I sleep in the back of my Suburban, and I could go anywhere I wanted to go. But as a wise person once told me, you can't go everywhere you want to go. And I was having trouble with that. And I was fishing. I fished 3 or 4 rivers in one day. One night, it was the first night, I stayed near the Beaverhead River, and I talked to a guide, and he convinced me. And for you fly anglers that like to fish with dry flies, you'll know what I didn't want to do it, but he told me when in Rome, do it. And I went and fished up by the dam with nymphs in the morning. And so let me tell you about that story. I I catch 4 more trout, each between 14 and 18 inches, then decide I've had enough nymph fishing. It's past 11 a.m. and the trout has risen steadily on the far bank for half an hour. I want to catch it, but the river is 60 feet wide and flows at several speeds across its span. I need to get closer before making a cast, so I sneak into the water. My first step sinks me knee-deep. The second puts the river's surface about 10 inches below the top of my waders. I slide my foot forward until I feel the bottom fall away. I need to get closer, so I take another step and ask the fish gods to show mercy. Swimming in waders is never easy. I use one hand like a 5-pronged oar, the other to keep my rod safe above my head. A guide has anchored his boat about 100 feet downstream, and I hear him and his clients laughing. Hell, I'm laughing too, but I'd like to get out of the Beaverhead River before I float down to them. About 20 feet into my swim, I grab onto some sedge and pull myself into a place where I can stand. The guide in the boat asks if I'm okay, and when I hold up my thumb as a sign of triumph, he holds up all 8 fingers and 2 thumbs to give me a perfect score. I take an exaggerated, satirical bow. When another boat floats by, I'm standing beside my truck in my Venetian red Scotch plaid boxer shorts, holding my waders by the neoprene booties while water pours from the opening that used to be around my chest. I've been there, says the guy in the back of the boat. After pulling on my jeans, I make a turkey and Swiss sandwich, open a Miller Lite, and stand in the sun to dry off. I don't usually have a beer with lunch, but I don't typically swim in my waders either. Unthreatened by my antics, the trout near the far bank continues to eat its lunch too. When another boat approaches, I ask the guys if they have a dry fly rod rigged and ready to go. They do. The guide anchors above the fish to position the man in the bow for a downstream cast. Perhaps I should be upset to stand next to my SUV and watch these guys catch my fish, but I'm not. The clients tell me they're lifelong friends from New York who've been fishing together in Montana for 20 years. When I tell the guys what happened when I tried to catch that fish, the guide laughs and says these trout rise on the west bank in this stretch of the river precisely for that reason. Catching the fish will be challenging, even with a boat with a guide who can position it. The conflicting currents that deliver the real flies make it nearly impossible for an angler to fool the fish with a fake one. This trout seems to know this, and each time it rejects the counterfeit, it eats the next natural fly that floats by. Like a huckster in a shell game, the trout always knows which shell covers the pea and which ones don't. I feel bad for the fisherman, but he stays upbeat. He puts the fly exactly where he needs to put it and sets the hook precisely when he needs to set it. The trout is tricky, though, and the where and the when are not what they appear to be. The anglers switch places, and the other guy takes several shots at the fish. When he makes his first cast, I swat a gnat from the back of my neck. A few seconds later, I smack another one. When the next one lands on my shoulder, I grab it between my index finger and thumb. But it's not a gnat. It's an ant. When I realize 100 more are marching up my leg, I rip off my pants and madly shake the ants from them. For the second time in an hour, I stand on the bank of the Beaverhead River, displaying my taste in boxer shorts to everyone who floats and drives by. The guide in the boat laughs and tells me he's been there. Little more happens, but then I drive back to the town of Barrett's and stop at the truck stop beside the highway. My tank needs gas, my cooler needs ice, and my hygiene needs servicing. I ask the lady behind the counter if I can get a shower here. She points to a sign on the wall that tells me how much money I need to pay, what rules I need to obey. I don't recall ever breaking a rule in a shower, and I can't imagine violating any of the ones I see on the sign, especially since I don't have a goat. Frankly, I can't envision anyone breaking these rules, but this truck stop is on Interstate 15, a major route connecting Canada to Mexico, so I try not to imagine anything at all. Let me tell you, so for whether you fish, whether you fly fish, whether you fish for trout, whatever you fish for, it could be bluegill. You've all experienced the most dreaded word in fishing, and I have a chapter. You could not. That's how you can tell this is from a real angler if they have a chapter called skunked. Skunked. The fishing was good, the catching that was bad. A.K. Best. Late one summer night in Michigan, immediately after I let Sonny out for his evening constitutional, the hypersensitive olfactory nerves in his snout sent an urgent signal to the olfactory bulb in his brain, and that triggered his legs to propel his body on a beeline toward a small stand of birch trees in our yard. The siren that drew him wasn't the tree. Instead, it was a small, stocky animal with black fur banded by 2 ivory stripes. My warning was as useless as a tungsten bead on a dry fly, and in the time it takes a sailfish to go from 0 to 60, Sonny was the target of a chemical warfare attack. The consequences of losing this battle were immediate and severe. We removed our vehicle from the garage so the yellow dog, doused in yellow oil, could shelter in place for the night. In the morning, Roxanne mixed up a concoction of baking soda, dishwashing detergent, hydrogen peroxide, tomato juice, newt eyes, frog toes, bat wool, and lizard legs. A few rounds of wash, rinse, repeat, and Sonny's stench faded from an awful amalgamation of rotten eggs, cabbage, garlic, reefer, and burning rubber into a milder mix of bat wool and tomato juice. But after that, every drop of water that touched Sonny's coat for the next 3 months awoke the foul-smelling hellhound squatting in his downy fur. The word skunk originated in the early 1600s as an Algonquin term that loosely translates to the fox who squirts urine. Eventually, the Algonquin skunk evolved and branched to the denominational skunked. Since then, politicians, athletes, cribbage players, college students, curious dogs, and anglers have come to know the word more intimately as a verb than a noun. For my first 2 weeks in Montana, I've been most worried about encountering a grizzly bear, rattlesnake, or a mountain lion. But on my 4th day in Melrose, I'm chiefly concerned about the proverbial verbal skunk chronicling my days on the water. Regarding being skunked, I once wrote, in The Habits of Trout, there was a time when I believed I could solve the mysteries of trout in particular and of life in general. But now I think we sometimes need to get skunked. We need to break our line on a good fish every now and again, and sometimes we need to cast all day without a take. We need to be grounded by the humility of failure so we can be lifted by the hope of success. Like sex in the kitchen, vegetable smoothies, New Year's resolutions, new Coke, stainless steel cars, and balloon loans. Some things make perfect sense the first time you hear about them. But in practice, they leave you shouting, who in the heck is the marketing genius who came up with this idea? Thoreau is famously misquoted as warning that many of us go fishing all our lives without knowing it's not the fish we are after. This popular conjecture is more true than false, but you don't find many anglers, including the enlightened ones, casting hookless flies. To paraphrase the old Harvard professor, Theodore Levitt, you don't buy a drill because you want to drill. You buy a drill because you want a hole. And so it is with fishing. I do want to get to the point we can have some discussion. I'm sure I'm not going to cover everything you'd want to hear, but I want to read to when you submit a book proposal to a publisher, so they'll ask you for a chapter. I'm going to read the beginning of the chapter that I sent, which you're kind of catching a theme. I promise you, if you read the book, there's plenty of fishing to be had, but there's also plenty of things that aren't fishing. And I'm going to wrap up with that, too. I'm going to read this one because it also features a local landmark here. Uniquely portable magic. Not that you have to be there. Books are a uniquely portable magic. Stephen King on writing. When I was a kid, our car and mobile home smelled like Winston cigarette smoke, and by osmosis, so did I. My mom loved to smoke, and most of her friends shared her passion for the game, especially Uncle Smokey. Uncle Smokey wasn't my uncle by blood or marriage, just a close family friend who wore a black captain's hat, drove a Harley-Davidson Cruiser, and called me Timothy J., as though I had one of those Southern double names. For my mom, Uncle Smokey, and their friends, cigarettes were the smartphones of the day. Everyone had to have one, whether it was good for them or not. So I lived my childhood in a cloud of smoke, and much like a fish doesn't know it's wet until it's not, I didn't know I stank until I didn't. Here in Montana, the big sky sun has broiled my body's veneer of sunscreen, sweat, river water, and mud to a funk that could run a pig off a manure wagon. Even Mom and Uncle Smokey would raise a brow at this achievement, but no one in the fly shop complains. They too are fly anglers. Like me, they just want to hang out with like-minded people and buy some things they may or may not need. I settle on a half dozen flies and a retractor gadget to keep my other gadgets and gizmos from getting away. When I pay the kid behind the counter, I submit to the stench and ask for directions to the nearest truck shop with a shower. Kid's answer is Montana's version of New England's "you can't get there from here." So I drive south to Helena and then west toward Missoula. At a travel plaza a few miles before Missoula, I give $10 to a lady with tangerine hair, a missing tooth, and a distinctive scar under her left eye. In return, she hands me 2 avocado-colored towels, a matching washcloth, and the key to room number 2. It's a practical room with a sink, a toilet, and a shower, all clean enough to erase my worries about not wearing the cheap flip-flops Roxanne said would keep my feet from becoming athletic. 15 minutes later, I'm back at the truck, and like the label on the body wash bottle promised, I smell like a Caribbean island vacation. But the inside of the Suburban does not. The once sweet smell of adhesive, fabric, and plastic that saturated the cab when I first drove off the Chevrolet lot is gone. In its place is a remnant of the crud I just scrubbed from my body, plus something I might blame on my dog if he were here. But despite all that, I smell the books. I have a box of books on the floorboard behind the driver's console, next to the place I lay my head at night to sleep. Anyone on a trip like this should have one of these boxes. In mine, I have The Longest Silence by Tom McGuane, Angling Days by Bob DeMott, Trout Madness and Trout Magic by John Volker, A Place on the Water and the River Home by Jerry Dennis, and every book Jerry Kustich wrote about his life in Montana. I first read Tom McGuane's book nearly 20 years ago on a backwoods Upper Peninsula fishing trip. Huddled in the back of my truck with a battery-powered light flooding the pages, I learned that McGuane's voice was everything but silent. I'm afraid the best angling is always a respite from burden, he wrote. Good anglers should lead useful lives, and useful lives are marked by struggle and difficulty and even pain. Perhaps the agony of simple mortality should be enough, but probably it is not. As they say in South America, everyone knows that they are going to die, yet nobody believes it. Human lapses of this kind enable us to fish, fornicate, overeat, and bet on horses. Well, I had never bet on horses, and I still haven't, but I had varying degrees of familiarity with the other pastimes. I felt that McGuane knew me, or at least knew who I wanted to be. His fishing stories were the kind I'd come to prefer. Fishing stories that weren't really about fishing. When I reread that book now, the deckle-edged pages and powerful prose remind me of a time when I hoped, as it had for McGuane, fly fishing could become my way of looking at the world. I was at a stage somewhere between neophyte and whatever place I'm in now. I could tell the difference between a mayfly and a caddis. I knew 6X tippet was finer than 4X, and I'd caught several fish on a dry fly I had tied on my own. But every large trout I would catch and every memorable cast I would make were still in front of me then. Like most of us, I hope and believe many more notable fish and casts will come. But those fly fishing firsts, much like a first date, first kiss, first love, they only come once. We need to keep reminders of that pre-first excitement in our box. I've read John Volker's books more times than Yogi Berra is said to have said something he didn't say. I've internalized the yarns to the point I often tell the stories as though they happened to me, and in some manner I suppose they have. I might not read from either book during this trip, but both are first editions, and they are most responsible for the sweet smell of vanilla emanating from the box. Testament of a Fisherman, The Prelude in Trout Magic, is the type of prose a person might have chiseled onto their gravestone. With 207 words that start with "I fish because I love to," and end with, "I suspect that so many of the concerns of men are equally unimportant and not nearly so much fun," Volker made answering the "why do we fish" question as difficult for any writer who came after him as Patsy Cline made singing "Crazy" for any singer who came after her. I bought Jerry Dennis's book, A Place on the Water, on May 9th, 1995, at Snowbound Books in Marquette, Michigan. 4 days before that, I attended a dinner for the Honor Society students in our electrical engineering department at Michigan Tech. George Swinson Jr., a University of Illinois professor whose father founded our department, spoke to our group. At 72 years of age and largely overlooked by the balding gene, Professor Swinson stood at the podium with the slight bend of a man who had ducked through doorways for most of his life. He repeatedly ran one hand through his thick white hair as he told us about building an impromptu antenna to record the first transmissions from the Soviet satellite Sputnik. I remember details of that night, partly because of those recordings' historical significance, and partly because of the flair with which Professor Swinson told his story. But mostly, I remember that night because of the phone call. You're going to have to read it to figure out what happened on phone call. Let me close that chapter, and then I'm going to read something a little new, not in the books, and then we'll get to discussion. Legend says that when asked about his most famous sculpture, Michelangelo said, "It's easy. You just chip away everything that doesn't look like David." It's an exaggerated analogy, but the best fishing writers sculpt their stories that way. The artist starts with a river and some fish, and then chips away everything that isn't about life. When you find stories like that, you put them in your box. Now, I like to sometimes talk about I think writing, no matter what you're writing about, nonfiction, fiction, particularly about fishing though, your job is like an old-time gold miner with a sluice pan. You dip it in, and you got all this stuff, and you start sloshing it around, and what are you looking for? You're looking for those little nuggets of gold, and that's the story. That's the thing you're looking for, and I think that's your job. Let me read you one piece that's not in either book, and then we'll call her good for me up here, and hopefully we'll talk. This is a story called, very short essay called Everything in Between. Between the wish and the thing, the world lies waiting. Cormac McCarthy, All the Pretty Horses. There's magic in between. The cadence of the cast, the poetic loop of the line, the soft landing of the leader, and the anxious anticipation of that one thing you think you can't live without, but always do. The sunlight bleeding through the trees, the aspen leaves telling jokes about the pines, and the white-throated sparrow singing the song that always makes you cry. The rotten smell of mud, the sour taste of wind, the warm embrace of the river, and the weight of another fool's monkey, another fool's circus lifting from your shoulders. In between, a mayfly gets eaten by a waxwing gets eaten by a hawk, and the clouds see everything and nothing at once. A mink steals an egg. 2 otters trap a frog, a chipmunk scolds the wind, and a dozen turtles warm their shells, toes, and tails on a log. A lone dragonfly paints the air. A doe's ears light up like beacons, and an eagle spreads her wings and leaps from the dying branch of an ancient pine, trusting air the way a shaman trusts intuition. Sun burns your nose. A mosquito bites your neck. A tick buries its head in your forearm, and mayflies emerge in the one style, size, and color you don't have in your box. Still, these are disappointments, not appointments, and tangled lines are better than deadlines. Leaky waiters are still waiters, and that soggy ham and cheese sandwich in your pack tastes better than anything on the menu at Zingerman's. At least out here it does. A grouse drums like an old tractor refusing to start, no matter how hard the farmer tries. One rock, a small one, is freckled with bird poop. Well, it's pee, actually, but you missed that part in biology class. A log is littered with crawdad pinchers, the only parts the raccoon wouldn't eat. Bears, wolves, gulls, squirrels, and deer make tracks in the sand. If the wolf tracks don't show claws, it might be a cougar. Cougars don't fight fair. But in between is neither a time nor place for worry. It's the time to smell wood smoke and wintergreen, pine sap, eucalyptus, damp earth, death, decay, rotten wood, and the coming rain. It's the place to watch tadpoles, minnows, ducklings, kits, pups, cubs, and hatchlings see their first stroke of light on a wash of black. It's a place for you to find some light, too. Your line tightens. Your rod bends. Your heart beats like a locomotive's wheels against iron rails. Your entire world is a straight line from the last titanium guide to the stainless steel hook in the corner of that mysterious jaw. Well, this must be the pièce de résistance, the magnum opus, the jewel in the crown, the point of the game. It's the reason you're here, right? Or is it for everything in between? That's it. So I will be happy to take questions. This is all like being back in class again. I got a class full of students, very few people in the front row, and no questions.
Have you fished for the coaster brook trout up by Michigan Tech? I think the Pilgrim River?
The Pilgrim River is like a mile from my home on Pilgrim Road, and I have not caught anything I readily identify as a coaster in the Pilgrim River, but I fish it often, and I would love to see the coasters there. I did get a coaster on the Huron River. Almost certain that was a coaster. But yeah, we got coasters. If we could get coasters back, and now, of course, the big project in the state, grayling. Wouldn't that be something? Grayling are a great example. When people talk about, I don't know how to do management and conservation, and do they matter? At one extreme, I went to a Trout Unlimited meeting many years ago in the Copper Country, Trout Unlimited, and we had a DNR officer there, and he was talking about their efforts, stream restoration, management of the fish. And someone stood up and said, when are you guys going to fix the fish problem? And he said, well, what fish problem is that? And he said, when I was a kid, my dad, my uncle, and we used to take coolers full of brook trout out of, we'll just call it Jones Creek. And now we can't catch a single one. And he thought, that's a self-answering question now, isn't it? And that's extreme. But when people say, you can't fish, you can't outfish a fishery, I remind them that the capital of Crawford County, Michigan, used to be Crawford. But the grayling fish were so prevalent and so popular, they changed the name of the city to Grayling. And now we don't have a single naturally reproducing one in the state. Yeah, we can take them all out if we want. And hopefully we can bring them back if we want to. We'll see. I hope that goes well. Yeah.
I think I know the answer. What happened to your dog?
Uh-oh.
And do you have a new one?
Let's answer the easy question first. We do not have a new dog yet. And he didn't make it for me to get back. And there's a chapter called Sunshine and Rainbows. And without reading it, I'll tell you the gist of that chapter, since you ask. The day I talked to Roxanne, this is my wife Roxanne, and she's the same one that's in the story, and many of the chapters. I went to fish on the Madison River by a very, very notable landmark, the $3 Bridge. And I was downstream from it, and a storm came through. And when it cleared, 2 rainbows were over that bridge the day I was there to grieve and mourn for my dog. And he's as you got the little pinch of, his name was Sonny. And so here was Sunshine, and then almost, I have pictures, but I do have pictures of that, but because it almost sounds like you make it up. And then rainbow trout began to rise, and so it was quite a day. And that's one of the events that later caused me to think maybe there's a book here. That I did not set off for that to happen, but that was going to be your answer too, wasn't it?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Was there another question?
Yeah, another Michigan author, Jim Harrison.
Yes.
Yeah, have you read his description of Melrose? He talks about going in.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's pretty accurate.
It's pretty, and I'm glad you bring that up because you see, I try to keep Spartan notes, but that means I do miss a few things. He loved the motel, the Sportsman's Motel in Melrose, the one that has 5-6 rooms. And I asked another Michigan native, Chris Dombrowski, fantastic writer. He knew Jim very well. He guided Jim, and I asked him. I said, I wonder if I was staying in one of the rooms that Jim Harrison stayed in when my inspiration to write the book came about. And he said, were you staying in one of the rooms there? And I said, yes. He said, you were staying in a room Jim Harrison stayed in. He said he loved that motel, and he stayed in every one of the rooms. And there's the Hitching Post is a restaurant bar next to it. And when I was in 2019, when this book happened, they had a big poster of Jim Harrison on the wall. New ownership now, and they took it down, which is kind of a shame.
He did a lot of writing in UP because he had a cabin on the forts.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have a question about your writing.
Sure.
How did you make the transition into writing? You said you were from academia.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you have classes in that, or did you have any training in writing, or did you just come about it from reading?
Yeah, I am a self-trained, generously tutored writer. I will name a name again. Jerry Dennis has just been spectacular. Role model for me in all possible ways. Writing, the least of, but still very powerfully. Yeah, I've had people ask that before. So, an engineering professor. How do you transition to writing, to telling stories? And I viewed my career as a professor as a storyteller. And I don't know if all professors in general, if all engineering professors do, but when I'm standing in front of a group of students trying to teach them something about electric circuits, Ohm's law, I have to tell them a story. There has to be something that motivates them to listen to the next sentence and the next sentence, and there needs to be an arc to put it. There's not quite a 3-act play, but it's close, and so I've always viewed it as storytelling. Writing proposals for agencies or companies to fund the research. Again, that is, I think so many people don't understand. You have to tell a story, and I was fortunate. My advisor at Washington University when I was a doctoral student, the first day he brought me into his office, and he gave me this little book, and he said, I want you to read this, and I never want to read anything you write that suggests to me that you did not read this. What do you think he gave me? Little book. Strunk and White. He handed me Strunk and White, and he said, and he always emphasized that our job would be storytelling. You're always telling a story. And I wrote all lesson notes, essentially online books for my courses. And I viewed them that way. So writing was a big part of my career, but when I transitioned into writing more, essays, personal essays, reflections, those types of things. And when I did that, it's just what a great thing to happen in your life, because it opened up a whole new thing for me to study along the way and learn from it. And the engineer in me, I will read something Jim Harrison writes, and he's like, what just happened here? How did he do that? Right? It's something way more than the words just came across that page. How did he do it? Did he set it up? So then I get fascinated trying to unravel what he was thinking. But that's not a mind you want to chase after too much, because he was brilliant by all matter. The person who I said invited me, Bob DeMott. Bob DeMott was very close friends with Jim Harrison, so I get a lot of second-hand stories. And there's a line one reviewer caught in the book, and it goes something like, I talk about fishing with Bob and his connections. He's very close friends with Nick Lyons, very close friend with Jim Harrison. And I just was thinking about that, and I said, I think it's kind of like sex, in that when you fish with someone in some way, you fish with everyone they've ever fished with. And there's a lot, I think, of Jim Harrison and Bob, and he would tell me a lot of stories. But he said he was brilliant. This is the smartest mind he'd ever seen.
Yeah, considered one of the best offenses in the last century.
Yeah.
Interesting path that came from like Traverse City up here, Nebraska, and down to Arizona.
Uh-huh.
And the stories tend to gravitate to that.
Yeah, right.
How many pieces have you written for Grace Sporting?
That one that just came out was the only one. That one is, there's a story there about hex fishing in Michigan, and it's interesting because you submitted it, I think 2 days later, he said, I'll take it, and I think that was 3 years ago. That's how long it took for that to show up.
You probably know Bob Davis then too.
What's that?
Bob Davis?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you keep how detailed a journal do you keep while you're out on the river? Or do you just kind of let you get home and write things down?
I'm terrible at it. I've tried so hard. Bob DeMott, his book Angling Days is all from his journals, and I've watched him in the cabin at night when he puts down. He brings a printer to his cave, prints out pictures, puts them in. Every night that journal is complete. I have to ask him for some of the things in the book. John Volker, I thought, I have to do this. When I saw his journals, and they weren't overly complete. They started getting wordier as he got older. But I've tried it so many times. I have so many false starts. I don't know what it is, but I can't keep a journal about fishing. I think maybe, if I could be honest, one of John Volker's great quotes, I forget who was interviewing, and because of course he wrote novels, he wrote fiction, he wrote nonfiction books about fishing, and he said some of my worst critics say my fishing stories are my best fiction. But that gives me, maybe that's it. I don't want to write a journal because I want to tell the story the way I remember it. Maybe I don't. But they're all true. They're true. But I don't know what it is. It's a hard thing for me to sit down and journal much. But what I substitute with are photographs. I do take a lot of pictures, flowers, people, whatever. I think, I'll forget this. I'll take a picture of it later. So I rely heavily on that. So maybe it's picture journaling in that sense. Helps me.
Those Walker journals are pretty succinct.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody that wants to read those, they just finished digitizing them in the archives at the moment, so they're online.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. That's great.
Well,
Yeah.
I was only done a week ago.
Oh, really?
You can go look at it by year.
Yeah.
By year, which is real nice.
Oh, yeah. It took a lot of time. And I got really sidetracked because everything's there. And I would go look up, they had them categorized, and one of them is letters and correspondences. And I just pick a random one, and it's some kid that wrote him a letter, and he took the time about fly fishing, and he took the time to respond. And, of course, typed it, and then he used the carbon paper, so he had copies of every letter that he would send out. It's I can't imagine.
Any other questions? All right, well, let's give Tim another hand. And as I said, support your local bookstore, please. Stop by and buy Tim's wonderful book. I can't recommend it enough. I read it in one reading, so that's how good it is. I don't generally do that. So anyway, thank you, Tim, for being an inspiration.
Well, thank you for having me. I'll stick around. I'll be happy to sign, talk, whatever. I got nowhere to go.